The night Onaya's phone buzzed, her world collapsed in seconds. A single text message from her husband Pharaoh read, "It's over. Don't bother calling. The account is mine now." She froze, staring at the empty bank app screen, her heart shattering. What Pharaoh didn't know was that the woman he tried to destroy had something powerful, something he would never see coming. Onaya sat quietly beside her late mother's bed, her eyes swollen from hours of crying. The room still smelled of medicine and silence, and her heart was already heavy with grief. Just as she reached for her mother's blanket, her phone buzzed. She picked it up, expecting maybe a comforting message from family. Instead, her screen showed a short text from her husband Pharaoh. "It's over. Don't bother calling. The account is mine now." For a moment, she thought it had to be a mistake. Her fingers shook as she opened her banking app. The numbers turned into nothing. Every cent was gone. The savings she had built, the money she thought was safe, had vanished. Her chest tightened as though the world had collapsed on her. Her mother had just taken her last breath hours ago. And now her husband, the man who had promised to stand by her, had left her with a cold line of words on a glowing screen. It was as if life had chosen the same night to snatch away everything she loved. Tears rolled down Onaya's face, but she didn't scream. She didn't call Pharaoh, she didn't beg. She sat still, clutching the phone in her palm, letting the pain burn deep into her soul. In that silence, a seed of strength planted itself in her heart. Pharaoh thought this text would end her. He thought she would crumble. But Onaya whispered to herself, her voice trembling yet steady, "I will not break." That night, beside her mother's bed, Onaya lost her past, her marriage, and her money. But she also found something else, an iron will she never knew she had. She wiped her tears, closed her mother's eyes with gentle hands, and promised herself she would not allow Pharaoh's cruelty to define her story. Deep inside, she knew the man who tried to destroy her would one day see a side of her he had never imagined. The morning after her mother's burial, Onaya forced herself out of bed. Her eyes were tired, but her mind kept replaying Pharaoh's cruel message. With shaking hands, she dressed quickly and went straight to the bank. Maybe there was still something left. Maybe it was just a mistake. She stood in line, her heart pounding. And when her turn came, she slid her card across the counter. The banker typed for a moment, then looked up with careful eyes. "I'm sorry, ma'am. The account has been completely emptied. Every cent." Onaya's knees almost gave way. She stepped outside with the receipt in her hand, staring at the bold zero printed across the paper. Her savings, her security, her future, gone in one sweep. Pharaoh had taken everything. She hurried back home, desperate to find something, anything that belonged to her. But when she opened the drawers, she froze. Her wedding jewelry box was missing. The gold her father had given her on her wedding day, the earrings passed down from her mother, even the documents of the small land her family left her. Everything had vanished. Pharaoh had not acted in anger. He had planned this. Onaya fell to her knees in the middle of the empty room, her fingers clutching the edge of the bed. This was not just betrayal, it was robbery. He had stripped her of her love, her trust, and now even the little treasures of her family. Neighbors walked past the house, whispering, but Onaya did not hear them. All she could feel was the sharp knife of betrayal cutting deeper than death itself. Yet, in the middle of that pain, something shifted inside her. She realized Pharaoh wanted her helpless. He wanted her destroyed. He wanted her to beg. But she pressed her palm against her chest and whispered, "No, not me." She picked up the empty jewelry case, stared at the blank spaces where her life once was, and slowly placed it back. The house no longer felt like home, but her spirit refused to bow. Pharaoh had taken everything from her hands, but he had not taken her will. Deep in her heart, she made another vow. If Pharaoh thought this was her end, he was about to witness her beginning. Days passed, and Onaya tried to make sense of the storm that had swallowed her life. Each morning she woke up to silence, a house that no longer carried warmth, and a heart that felt heavier with every breath. She thought the worst had already happened. Losing her mother, losing her marriage, losing her savings. But life had one more dagger waiting for her. One afternoon, a neighbor came to her with pity in her eyes and handed over a phone. "Onaya, you need to see this." With shaking hands, Onaya scrolled through the screen. Her heart stopped. There was Pharaoh smiling proudly, standing beside another woman. The woman's name was Dara. She was dressed in a gown that looked painfully familiar, and around her neck hung Onaya's wedding necklace. On her fingers sparkled Onaya's missing rings. Dara posed with pride, her captions cruel and sharp. Out with the old, in with the chosen one. The discarded wife should watch and learn. Onaya's breath caught in her throat. This was not just betrayal, it was mockery. Pharaoh had not only stolen from her, he had handed her treasures to another woman, parading them online for the world to see. Dara posted daily, flaunting jewelry Onaya once held close to her heart, jewelry tied to her family's memory. Strangers in the comments laughed and mocked, calling Onaya weak, calling her forgotten. Each picture pierced her like a blade. For a night, Onaya allowed herself to cry. She buried her face in her pillow, shaking from the pain of humiliation. But as dawn came, something inside her shifted. She realized that Dara's cruelty was not strength, it was insecurity. Only a woman desperate to shine would wear another woman's crown and mock her for losing it. Pharaoh thought Onaya would crawl back, begging. Dara thought mocking her would break her spirit, but they were both wrong. Onaya wiped her tears and stood tall before her mirror. Her reflection looked fragile, but her eyes burned with a new fire. If they think I am discarded, they will one day see who I really am, she whispered to herself. She no longer felt the need to fight with words or public anger. Instead, she chose silence, a silence that was stronger than rage. She would rise, not by tearing them down, but by building herself up. That morning, Onaya dressed simply, tied her scarf with steady hands, and stepped out of the house with a quiet determination. The world saw a broken woman, but deep inside, Onaya was already shaping into something stronger than betrayal, stronger than humiliation. She was ready for the path that would turn her pain into power. Onaya knew she could not waste her life crying over Pharaoh's betrayal. The more she thought about how he had stripped her of everything, the more she realized that staying broken was exactly what he wanted. She refused to give him that victory. She needed to think, to breathe, to find a way forward. Late one night, she picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts until her eyes stopped on a familiar name, Chima. He was her childhood friend, now a successful lawyer in the city. For a moment she hesitated, afraid to sound desperate. But then she pressed call. When Chima answered and heard her trembling voice, he didn't mock or pity her. He listened quietly until she finished. Then he spoke with calm strength. Onaya, Pharaoh may think he has won, but he doesn't know everything. Do you remember the shares your father left you in Mako Construction before he passed? They're still in your name. You own part of that company. Onaya blinked in shock. She had almost forgotten about it. The shares had been untouched for years, sleeping in dusty files because she was too focused on her marriage and her mother's illness. Her heart beat faster as hope lit up inside her chest. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she was not empty-handed. Pharaoh had taken the money she worked for, but he could not touch what her father had secured for her long ago. She thanked Chima, tears rolling down her cheeks, but this time they were not tears of defeat. They were tears of relief. The next morning, Chima met her with a folder of documents. Together, they reviewed her rights. Onaya realized that her father had not only left her shares, but also the possibility to use them as leverage. Mako Construction was not a small firm anymore. It had grown into a respected company with valuable contracts. Pharaoh thought she had nothing left, but in reality, she held a key that could open doors far bigger than he ever imagined. Onaya felt a surge of courage. She no longer needed to beg, no longer needed to cry at Pharaoh's feet. She would stand on her own, using what was rightfully hers. That night, she sat by her window, staring at the stars and whispered, "Papa, you planted this seed for me. Now I will make it grow." She didn't know yet how high she would rise, but one thing was certain. Pharaoh's betrayal was not her ending. It was the beginning of her hidden strength unfolding. Onaya threw herself into work with a strength she never knew she had. With Chima by her side, she learned everything she could about her father's shares in Mako Construction. At first, the company directors doubted her. She was quiet, grieving, and looked fragile, but Chima reminded her that power was not always loud. Onaya attended every meeting, studied every document, and asked every question until she understood how the business worked. Slowly, she began to make her presence felt. What Pharaoh thought was worthless was now becoming her foundation. Nights were the hardest, but also the most powerful. When others slept, Onaya sat by her small desk, papers spread around her, eyes burning from reading contracts and proposals. Chima often stayed late, guiding her, but much of the fight was hers alone. She was no longer the wife waiting at home for Pharaoh to provide. She was becoming a woman who could stand on her own. Every deal she helped close, every decision she signed, built her confidence like bricks in a new house. The more she worked, the stronger she grew. Meanwhile, Pharaoh paraded his new life with ldea as if it were a trophy. They posted photos at parties, laughing as if they had won some great victory. Pharaoh even mocked Onaya openly, calling her the abandoned wife with nothing but ashes. ldea wore her stolen jewelry to gatherings, showing it off with pride. To outsiders, Onaya looked defeated, but she carried her silence like a shield. She let them laugh because she knew the truth. She was building something they could not see. Each time she signed a paper or secured a contract for Mako construction, she imagined Pharaoh's face when he would one day realize whose hand was behind it. But revenge was not her only drive. Deep down, she wanted to honor her father's legacy. He had left her those shares not to be wasted, but to be used. She wanted to build something that would last, something that would prove she was not broken, not discarded, not powerless. Weeks turned into months, and Onaya's name began to rise quietly in business circles. People who once overlooked her started noticing her decisions, her influence, her wisdom. She kept her progress hidden from Pharaoh, but inside her heart, the fire kept burning brighter. He thought she was finished, but she was just beginning. Onaya had walked through betrayal and humiliation, but instead of ashes, she was gathering sparks. With every step forward, those sparks grew into flames, and soon the rising fire inside her would be too powerful for anyone to ignore. Pharaoh and ldea lived loudly, showing off their new life as if it were a crown. They laughed in public, dined at the finest restaurants, and spoke openly about Onaya as though she was a ghost of the past. She has nothing, Pharaoh would boast. No house, no job, no dignity. ldea would nod, flashing the jewelry that once belonged to Onaya, smirking as if wearing another woman's treasures made her powerful. To the world, Onaya looked silent, invisible, forgotten. But beneath that quietness, something was growing stronger every single day. While Pharaoh celebrated, Onaya moved like a shadow. She rarely spoke of her work, even to those close to her. With Chima's guidance, she had turned her father's shares into a seat at the table of Mako construction. She studied the market, learned the gaps, and began signing contracts Pharaoh's own company was desperately chasing. Each time she secured a deal, it felt like reclaiming a piece of herself that had been stolen. She did not shout about it, she did not announce it online. She let her victories breathe in silence, knowing the right moment would reveal everything. There were nights she returned home exhausted, her mind heavy with numbers and strategies, but her heart carried a quiet joy. Every signature on a paper was more than business. It was justice unfolding step by step. Pharaoh had left her with debts, but now his company was the one struggling, and he had no idea that the contracts slipping away from his hands were falling straight into hers. The irony of it all made Onaya stronger. Pharaoh laughed at her, calling her a beggar, while unknowingly standing on ground that was slowly crumbling because of her decisions. ldea joined in the laughter, mocking Onaya as the forgotten wife, never realizing that Onaya was not forgotten at all. She was simply waiting, watching, and building. Her silence became her greatest weapon. In a world where Pharaoh and ldea shouted their victories, Onaya's power grew quietly, steady like a river carving its path. She did not need to clap back at their insults. She let her progress speak in whispers only she and Chima could hear. And with every passing week, those whispers grew louder in the world of business, though Pharaoh remained blind to it. Onaya knew her moment would come. For now, she stayed still, a silent watcher of her enemy's arrogance, gathering strength with every hidden triumph. She was not broken, she was not weak, she was simply waiting for the perfect time when silence would turn into thunder. The day of the family gathering arrived, a celebration where both Pharaoh's and Onaya's relatives were present. It was the kind of event where everyone dressed their best, eager to gossip, to compare, to measure success. Pharaoh walked in proudly with ldea by his side, her wrists glittering with Onaya's stolen jewelry. He shook hands, laughed loudly, and made sure all eyes were on him. Onaya entered quietly, wearing a simple gown, her hair tied back, carrying herself with calm dignity. Many people whispered when they saw her, some with pity, some with curiosity. As the gathering reached its peak, Pharaoh raised his voice so everyone could hear. He lifted his glass and smirked. "To new beginnings," he said. "Some of us are blessed while others," his eyes turned toward Onaya, "are left with nothing but the shame of being abandoned. She is a woman discarded, a reminder of what happens when you have nothing to offer." Laughter rippled through the hall as Dara clung to his arm, nodding proudly. Onaya remained still, her face calm, her hands folded gently in front of her. But before Pharaoh could continue, a man from the company board entered the hall with a few associates. His voice carried weight as he spoke. "Before we continue this celebration, we have an announcement from Mako Construction." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the group. The man unrolled a document and read clearly. "As of today, Onaya Ease has been declared the majority shareholder of Mako Construction. Her shares now surpass every other investor combined. From this day forward, she is recognized as the principal decision-maker of the company." Gasps filled the hall. Heads turned from Pharaoh to Onaya. Disbelief painted on every face. Pharaoh's confident smile froze, his glass trembling in his hand. Dara's eyes widened, the jewelry on her wrist suddenly feeling heavy and worthless. Onaya did not move, did not gloat, did not even raise her voice. She simply bowed her head slightly in acknowledgement, her calm presence speaking louder than any words. The whispers grew louder. "She owns Mako? How? Pharaoh said she had nothing." The same people who had pitied her now looked at her with respect, even awe. Pharaoh stood stiff, his pride collapsing in front of everyone. His attempt to shame Onaya had turned into his own downfall. In that moment, Onaya's silence was her victory. She didn't need to defend herself. The truth had spoken for her, and it had struck harder than any insult ever could. After the announcement at the gathering, Pharaoh's world began to crumble in front of everyone. The pride he carried like a crown slipped from his head, and whispers spread faster than fire. He tried to force a smile, but his hands shook as he set down his glass. The humiliation burned his skin, and he could no longer ignore it. Furious and desperate, he stormed toward Onaya, his voice low but sharp. "What game are you playing, Onaya? How dare you stand here and act like you've won?" But before Onaya could respond, Dara pulled at his sleeve, her face twisted with anger. "Pharaoh," she hissed, "what is happening? You told me she was finished, that she had nothing. You said all the money, all the property, all the power was yours." Her voice rose enough for nearby guests to hear. Pharaoh grabbed her arm, trying to quiet her, but she pulled away. "Don't you dare silence me. Tell me the truth. Do you still control the wealth or not?" Pharaoh's chest tightened. For the first time, his arrogance faltered. He leaned closer and whispered, "It's gone. I don't control it anymore. The company, the money, it's hers now." Dara's eyes widened in horror, then quickly narrowed with rage. She stepped back, her hand pressed against her chest as if she had been struck. "So I gave up everything for you for nothing?" she spat. "You paraded me around, made me mock her, all while hiding the truth. You are nothing without her." The room grew tense as more people overheard. Dara's voice grew louder, fueled by humiliation. "I will not stay with a man who has nothing. You lied to me, Pharaoh. You promised me a throne, but all you gave me is shame." With that, she ripped off the necklace she had once stolen pride in wearing, Onaya's necklace, and threw it at Pharaoh's chest. Gasps echoed around them. Pharaoh reached out desperately, but Dara turned her back and walked away, her heels striking the floor like drums of finality. Guests stepped aside, whispering, some even laughing quietly. Pharaoh stood frozen, his illusion shattered, abandoned by the very woman he thought proved his triumph. Onaya remained calm, her eyes steady, her silence louder than any words. Pharaoh had tried to destroy her, but now he was the one standing exposed, stripped of pride, wealth, and the loyalty of the woman he had chosen over her. For the first time, he understood what it felt like to be discarded. The hall was still buzzing from the shock of Dara's outburst when Pharaoh, broken and desperate, turned back to Onaya. His pride, once so untouchable, now lay in pieces around him. His voice cracked as he stumbled forward, his eyes wild with fear. "Onaya, please," he whispered at first, then louder, until every pair of eyes in the room fixed on him. "I was wrong. I made a mistake. Take me back. We can fix this." You and I, we can still be together. Gasps rippled through the families gathered. This was the same man who had once mocked her, who had thrown her aside with nothing but a text. Now he was on his knees, his hands reaching out, his face drenched in humiliation. Onaya stood tall, her shoulders straight, her expression calm. She looked down at him not with anger, but with the strength of someone who had already healed. Onaya, Pharaoh begged again, his voice breaking. I'll change. I'll give you anything you want. I can't live without you. Please don't leave me like this. He clutched at her gown, his tears falling onto the fabric. Dara was gone, his wealth was gone, and the illusion of power he once carried had dissolved. All he had left was the woman he betrayed, and even she was now beyond his reach. Onaya took a deep breath and finally spoke. Her words were steady, sharp, and unforgettable. Pharaoh, she said, do you remember the night you ended everything? The night you sent me one line on my phone? You wrote, it's over. Don't bother calling. The account is mine now. You divorced me in one line. She paused, letting the silence fill the hall. Then, with her chin lifted high, she added, let me answer you in one line. I'm free. The room fell completely silent. The weight of her words settled over everyone like a stone dropped into water, rippling through every corner. Pharaoh's hand slipped from her gown as his body shook. He knew in that moment there was no going back. His arrogance, his betrayal, his cruelty, they had all led him here, to his knees, with nothing to hold on to. Onaya turned slowly and walked away, her steps graceful, her dignity intact. The families watched in awe, whispering to each other. Some nodded in respect, others stared in shock. Pharaoh remained on the floor, broken and defeated, realizing that the woman he once tried to destroy had risen so far above him that she could no longer be reached. Onaya's freedom was complete, and it was her greatest victory. Onaya stood in her new office, looking out at the city that once felt like a prison, but now looked like a canvas waiting for her touch. She had the power, the influence, and the wealth that Pharaoh once used to belittle her. But instead of using it to mock him back, she chose a different path. She remembered the nights she cried alone, feeling abandoned and worthless, and she knew there were many other women living through that same pain. With determination, she poured her energy into creating a foundation that built homes and training centers for women who had been cast aside. Each brick laid was like a statement to the world. No woman deserved to be thrown away like she was. Families who had once looked down on her now spoke her name with respect. Newspapers carried her story, not as a scandal, but as an inspiration. Women arrived from every corner, broken but hopeful, and Onaya welcomed them with open arms. She provided them not just with shelter, but with skills, opportunities, and dignity. Slowly, her work grew into a movement, and her name became a symbol of strength and hope. People admired her not just for what she survived, but for what she built out of her survival. Meanwhile, Pharaoh's world crumbled piece by piece. His wealth was gone, his company no longer his, and Dara had abandoned him the moment she realized he had nothing left to offer. The same friends and family who once laughed with him now avoided his calls. He became a shadow of the proud man who once mocked Onaya. And as fate would have it, he couldn't escape seeing her rise. Billboards, newspapers, even television shows carried her face, celebrated her projects, and praised her wisdom. One evening, Pharaoh stood across the street watching one of Onaya's new homes being opened. He saw women smiling, children running freely, and Onaya at the center, radiant and calm, surrounded by love and respect. His chest tightened with regret. The woman he had once dismissed as nothing had become more powerful, more admired, and more fulfilled than he ever dreamed for himself. Onaya never looked his way. She didn't need to. Her life spoke louder than any revenge could. She had turned her pain into purpose, her heartbreak into healing, and her shame into strength. Pharaoh, stripped of everything, was left with only memories of what he threw away.